This door is closed, and this door, and this door. And behind this closed door, somebody is sitting staring at a door that is closed. Sitting, waiting for a bell to ring that might or might not ring. For a knock that might or might not happen. And the daylight leaks away, and the days and the weeks, and the door stays closed from the inside, from the outside, and nobody comes, and nothing happens. Even the purveyors of pension funds, then we can buy fitness, youthfulness, and maybe even happiness well into old age. And this can be achieved simply by giving them a bit of our money now to pay for life's little luxuries later. One of the luxuries being early retirement. As I enter my 6th decade, I remain as suspicious as ever of what's on offer. You've seen those adverts on TV, the kind with tan blokes on the beach, those super fit pensioners with lifestyles that are out of reach. Well, if you're sitting in a high-rise or alone in a basement without a view, if you're feeling left out and jealous and wishing it was you, remember it's merely a product that you're being sold, not a life beside the champagne-littered ocean on a beach made of gold.
So with a little planning, being beached at 55 can be quite rewarding, in more ways than one.
I think that's an inheritance from Mrs. Thatcher. She was all for people working for themselves, making sure that they were all right, and you could get on if you really tried hard enough. But society's not just like that, and not everybody can make a lot of money.
Celebrity of my life. Do you want to?
Private pension scheme for the middle class, perhaps, but for me it's a fucking dream. I've never had the money, always fared stream. I thought that maybe when I ran out of steam, the kids would be my pension scheme, but it never turned out that way. Fared streamers too, what can they afford to do? And anyway, I pay for it in sweat. I've done all the dead-end jobs that needed being done, despite the blows to my self-esteem. Private pension schemes, are they some kind of financial scam in any way who's promoting them? Not someone who paid the way in sweat, and if so, and if you've got one. Spent months researching the lives of people who fell through these safety nets and who died lost and alone.
Dr. Chambers, the coroner, told me how things used to be. When I was first doing this job, he said, if someone, one of these sudden death cases, as we now call them, If someone like that died alone and their body lay there for months, or even years, as it sometimes is, then it would be something of a scandal. It would be a front-page story on the Daily Telegraph. Everyone would say, how can this happen? Why wasn't she missed? What's going on? There'd be a great deal of concern. But now, yes now, I see many cases of that sort, he said. They're just gone, and no one notices. Many older folk who live in local authority housing have their rent paid by direct debit. Martin, one of the funeral officers I spoke to, said some pensions go unclaimed for years. They might make a regular but fairly anonymous journey to the supermarket and back, and that might be it. Martin said when he goes into a house, he'll sit there going through piles of letters, dead letters, usually old things, and reading diaries, shopping lists, old apprenticeship papers, college certificates, trying to piece things together. Some of them led ever such interesting lives.
Centuries of our literature, but it was the 60s generation that tore apart tradition and invented youth culture. Now it's faced with looming old age. Groups are springing up all over like spring lambs, trying to make sense of life after 50, often in ways that leave me feeling distinctly uncomfortable.
Okay, the subject for today at our first anniversary Age Power meeting is a subject that all of us think about at different times of our lives. What are we doing with the rest of our lives? Or what are you doing with the rest of your life? Well, unlike Weight Watchers, we will have not only weekly classes, but we will bring experts to teach good health keeping, how to avoid osteoporosis, how to strengthen your back so it doesn't go out 3 times a year. We will be teaching good nutrition so that longevity is something that isn't merely age, but is a good quality of life. We're going to be having a discussion on spirituality very briefly from Father Vladimir, but I thought to get you in shape, we'll get Jean Krishak to come up and just do a quick, relaxing exercise to get us all into shape. Jean, come on up.
Age power is youth culture grown up. Instead of love-ins, we've now got age-ins. People who are teenagers in 50s America are pensioners now, and they don't want to let go of what they have. Their buzzword is empowerment, and their influence is spreading. Bernice Weston is the founder of Weight Watchers, who has just started Age Power in this country.
These people control 80% of disposable wealth in this country, 180 billion pounds a year. They are in excellent nick, physically, mentally, emotionally. They were raised, at least the baby boomers, to want and get the best in life and know the price for everything. A sound base and a group of people similarly involved to act as a support system. All we want is to be able to sit down with these financial people and say, look, we wake up with a sweat at 2 o'clock in the morning. worrying about what's going to happen to our money.
Age power is an important and positive step in the right direction, but I do worry about any emphasis on financial well-being because it excludes so many people. The notion that our existence can be a series of lifestyle choices is absolutely absurd. Reality is very different.
The idea of decay in a culture like ours is just anathema. In America and in the UK, I think it's just in the advertising culture. I mean, the idea of being something that sort of molds away and sort of falls apart in the end or loses its strength, it's just a really sort of unsavoury image, I think, to a lot of advertisers and to a lot of people in general. I think that young people don't want to have to live with the thought that age is round the corner.
In a controlled explosion of dry grief, fragile as skeletons, trembling in my hand like my daughter's origami monsters, their worn muslin stiff with mucus, they let me prise them open. With a sound like tearing, the crumbs of snot flick out at me, my father's latest creations dead. Each week I wash them, press warmth into the yielding creases and bring them back. So many neat, flat squares for him to snort his thick grief into. Each week I find them again, wreckage of crippled beasts and flowers, to flutter or creep or scuttle into my machine as I try to name them: butterfly, tortoise, crane, crab, lily, cygnet, crane, 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 crane.
Age, I do abhor thee. Youth, I do adore thee. Shakespeare in one of his less compassionate moments. The thought of aging and decay is what many of us turn away from, especially as it creeps up on us. The character speaking in 55-year-old poet Hugo Williams' poem can't see much to recommend old age.
When I grow up, I want to have a bad leg. I want to limp down the street I live in without knowing where I am. I want the disease where you put your hand on your hip and lean forward slightly, groaning to yourself. If a little boy asks me the way, I'll try and touch him between the legs. What a dirty old man I'm going to be when I grow up. What shall we do with me? I promise I'll be good if you let me fall over in the street and lie there, calling like a baby bird. Please, nobody come. I'm perfectly all right. I like it here. I wonder, would it be possible to get me into a National Health hospice somewhere in Manchester? I'll stand in the middle of my cubicle, holding onto a piece of string for safety, shaking like a leaf at the thought of my suitcase. I'd certainly like to have a nervous tick so I can purse my lips up all the time like Cecil Beaton. Can I be completely bald, please? I love the smell of old pea. Why can't I smell like that? When I grow up, I want a thin piece of steel inserted into my penis for some reason. Nobody's to tell me why it's there. I want to guess. Tell me, is that a bottle of old Burgundy under my bed? I never can tell if I feel randy anymore. Can you? I think it's only fair that I should be allowed to cough up a bit of blood when I feel like it. My daughter will bring me a special air cushion to hold me upright, and I'll watch in baffled admiration as she blows it up for me. Here's my list. Nappies, storybooks, munchies, something else. What was the other thing? I can't remember exactly, but when I grow up, I'll know. When I grow up, I'll pluck at my bedclothes to collect lost thoughts. I'll roll them into balls and swallow them.
I think in a culture that identifies with purely the physical body, which is, I'm afraid, the nature of the culture that we have in the West, both in America and in this country. It is a very narrow and unsatisfactory basis on which to live a life.
Bedside table, 10 inches high, owl-shaped, with its bubbly cream-coloured surface and its two plastic halves joined badly by blobs of glue. It was my childhood totem, my security. How ferociously it glowed in the dark. I snuggled down, not knowing there would never be a time of such trust again. Beyond the bedroom door, adults stood guard. The presence was an extra guarantee that warded off so many different kinds of bogeymen. But now I am back in the dark again. The adults are gone. Beyond the bedroom door is only a lack of them. And it takes no bedside lamp to see there is no bogeyman bar one. It's taken so long for him to cross the room. Truth is, he was never really gone. No matter how many lights I put on, he was always there. From childhood to middle age, he inched his way across my room unseen. And now his fingers creep into me, into the cavity where the heart rots and the blood sloshes about. The bogeyman reaches to put out the night light. There's another area of old age worth looking into, one I mentioned earlier, and that many of us shy away from or ignore entirely: the soul. In old age, we reap the cost of investing exclusively in the material world. Such investments are made at the expense of our inner lives. An old age without an inner life must be a form of hell, as Dante and Milton have told us. Perhaps we ignore the spiritual because there is so little evidence of it, buried beneath a landslide of greed and avarice, and a disdain for aging with which in late youth and middle age we collude. I think the poet Kathleen Raine has got it right.
This little house, no smaller than the world, nor I lonely, dwelling in all that is.
Everyone and noted how it walked then. And some, unconscious that grinning Jack abided his time inside their flesh, stared back and wondered what I saw. boil on the face, the cut of a suit. The vanities were small and obvious. Women wore their coldest masks, and men looked elsewhere and thought perhaps I was some acquaintance they had dropped. But I did not know them well enough to say, it's grinning Jack I see today, not your beauty nor your ugliness, nor how fresh you are, nor how obvious the chemical decay, but the skeleton that every man ignores as calmly as he can, who'll kiss you on the cheek and blow the floss of temporary things away. It's grinning Jack I see today, and one scene you'll never. The growing awareness of death affect us? How will we respond? It depends on attitude. For it's the individual's attitude now that will determine the kind of old age they will have. And if we haven't sorted out our attitude by the time we're middle age, we're in real trouble. There's something lovely about youth and something ugly about clinging to it. When something vanished from her face, when something banished its first light, it left a puzzle there, and he wished he could have gone to her and said, it is immaterial, this surface change, but that would have been too much a lie, for beauty does reach some kind of height, and those who hunger for her now tomorrow might have a less keen appetite. Yet beauty sinks deeper than the flesh, and men seeking only surfaces will never know what it is they have let go.
Are you a member, sir? Of course I'm not. So I have to pay in full for the pleasure of entering some former gents, where even I can tell fulfillment isn't waiting in the smell of beer and men. Is it worth it, cruising the streets for fun? Johnny's in your pocket, a spare crash helmet slung on the handlebars. If I don't slide under a bus in the rain, the bike breaks down, or I'm stopped by the cops again. My room is comfortable, warm and bright. Why can't I stay in it and work? When darkness falls, like some excuse from God, I weaken inwardly, I melt, for little sighs and looks, for words that don't make sense. Desire, desire, desire. How does it go? I have too dearly bought. When someone asks me for a light, I jump 6 inches in the smoke-filled air and come down with a bump. What am I doing here, in the borderline, at 2:30? The later it gets, the younger everyone looks, the longer ago. The girls coming through the door are probably children by now, dropping by on their way to school. For what they are, and for what they do, my body drags its feet.
Perhaps one of the reasons for the existence of poets in any culture is that they try and express for their society images most people turn away from. Whether it's Philip Larkin talking about the anaesthetic from which none come round, Dylan Thomas raging against the dying of his father's light, or Mimi Calvati wishing her father would go gently, it's often left to poets to explore our emotions concerning age and death.
I visited my dad just before he was having an operation for throat cancer. And then I think his dying took about 2 years, and his last 6 months were spent in coma. But during the time I was there visiting him, I felt quite angry, I suppose, and Dylan Thomas's lines were going through my mind quite often, just, the do not go gentle into that good night, rage, rage, and my dad just raged endlessly. Mr. Khalvati, larger than life he was. Too large to die, so they wired him up on a bed. Small as a soul he is on the mountain ledge. Lid's gone thin as a babe's. If it's mist he sees, it's no mist he knows by name. Can you hear me, Mr. Khalvati? Larger than life he was, and the death he dies, large as the hands that once drowned mine, and the salt of his laugh in the wave. Small as a soul he is on the mountain ledge. Can you squeeze my hand? Oh, where are the hands I held in mine to pull me back to the bays? Mr. Khalvati? Larger than life he was, with these outstretched hands that squeeze thin air. Wired he is, tired he is, and there, small as a soul he is on the mountain ledge. No nudging him out of the nest. No one to help him fall or fly. There's no coming back to the bays. Mr. Khalvati, larger than life he was, small as a soul he is on the mountain ledge. That he had, not of pain, not of suffering, but of just not being there, to me was horrifying. And I suppose I felt angry that you know, that why are our values, why is everything like that people are not enabled to let go when it comes.
And psyche is acceptance. Bombarded by the media, we're so obsessed with money and youth and the fear of losing both that we have little acceptance of the aging process. The poet-novelist Thomas Hardy knew about acceptance, and his embracing of it stood him in good stead. To condense his poem on his 86th birthday, "Well, world, you have kept faith with me. On the whole, you have proved to be much as you said you were. Wise warning for your credit's sake, which I for one fail not to take, and hence could stem such strain and ache as each year might assign."
One of the temptations of old age is remorse and regret, and one's sorry for things one has done wrong. It isn't what has been done to one that one feels badly about, it's the bad things one has done oneself. But I think that too can be a form of selfishness. Forget it. Just enjoy this miraculous, marvelous world which we're in, and enjoy it.
By the time I arrived at where I had no intentions of going, half a lifetime had passed. I'd sleepwalk so long. While I dozed, houses outside which gas lamps had spluttered were pulled down and replaced, and my background was wiped from the face of the earth. There's so much I ought to have recorded, so many lives that have vanished. Families, neighbours, people whose pockets were worn thin by hope. They were the loose change history spends without caring. Now that they have become the air I breathe, not to have marked their passing seems such a betrayal. My mother's death a few years ago changed how I felt about old age. She had a social life in the neighbourhood, her friends, her sister, mates down at the local social club where she went for a drink. She had a state pension, as well as other bits and pieces, and extra from me when possible. The older she got, the better I was getting to know her. But then, very suddenly, she was no longer there. The point is, our lives are unpredictable, whether simple, complex, happy or sad, they are ultimately finite. We might like the idea of buying security, but there's no contract we can draw up with a financial institution that will guarantee us freedom from pain or death.
When we last hugged each other in the garage, our two heads were level. Over his shoulder I could see potato sacks. Another season, and in the dusty sunlight I shall gather him to me, smooth his collar, bend to listen for his precious breathing. When he reaches to my waist, I shall no longer detach his small hands from my skirt, escape his shrill voice in the dawn garden. When he comes to my knees, I shall pick him up and rock him, rub my face on the white stubble of his cheek, see his silver skull gleam up at me through thin combings.
Beyond the view of crossroads, ringed with breath, her bed appears. The old rose covers death has smoothed and stilled. Her fingers lie inert. Her nail file lies beside her in its sheath. The morning's work over. Her final chore was breaking up the sugar just before siesta, sitting cross-legged on the carpet, her slippers lying neatly by the door. The image of her room behind the pane, though lost as the winding road shifts its plane, returns on every straight, like signatures we trace on glass, forget and find again. I've inherited her tools, her anvil, her axe, her old scrolled mat, but not her skill. And who would choose to chip at sugar blocks when sugar cubes are boxed beside the till? The scent of lilacs from the road reminds me of my own garden. A neighbouring tree grows near the fence. At night, its clusters loom like lantern moons, pearly white, unearthly. I don't mind that the lilac's roots aren't mine. Its boughs are, and its blooms. It curves its spine towards my soil and litters it with dying stars. Deadheads I gather up like jasmine. My grandmother would rise and take my arm, then sifting through the petals in her palm, would place in mine the whitest of them all. Salam, دختر ماه من. Salam. Salam, my daughter lovely as the moon. Would that the world could see me, Telogin, through your eyes. Or that I could see a world that takes such care to tend what fades so soon.
When I was young, my parents both came of very large families, and I grew up with people of all ages and varieties, and I never actually thought about any of them being so old that they weren't any good to me. Each one had their own place and their own interest, but since then I think the really unfortunate thing is that our society has become rather disintegrated. It's partly because people do move about a great deal more and families don't live so near together. But I think that somehow there was a sort of solidarity between the generations when I was young. And I think we have to try and somehow recapture that.
But it's all right. It's part of life.
I agree with Faith. To be cherished is the one real security. We inherit our perceptions of age from the generation before us. Change these, and the attitude to age will change. It's unrealistic to believe we can all become wise old mystics. But if we could aim for acceptance of ourselves and the old people we'll become, then our lives and thinking won't be controlled by pension funds with their dubious promises, or plastic surgeons with their scalpels, or advertisers and the images of eternal youth.
With a wave of her old hand, she put her past away, 90 years astray in time's fading land. With that dismissive gesture, threw off pretense, rose to her proud stature, had done with world's ways, had done with words, closed her last written book, to ponder deeper themes in unrecorded dreams.
And yet how hard it must be to achieve acceptance, even for the old. In death we lose the only world we have known, and none of us wish to let go of that. At the end of life, how trivial must seem the things we fretted over, whether financial security, youth, whatever. How absurdly unimportant then those things we imagined are priorities. I came first through the wet grass humming with spring, and swim now through the evening soft sunlight gone cold. I'm old in this green ocean, going a final time to the rose. North wind, until I reach it, keep your icy breath away that changes pollen into dust. Let me be drunk on this scent a final time, and then blow if you must.
If the sun